right. Can everybody, can you see the images okay? Okay. All right.
Can you raise it up higher? Raise it up.
Is what? Can I raise it up?
We can't really raise it, sorry.
Yeah, I don't think we can move the image. Is that going to be okay? Can you hear me? All right. Before we get started, I'd like to introduce a couple of special people that are in the audience tonight. Trevor Thomas and his guide dog, Tennille, sitting right over there. Stand up, Trevor. Trevor and I are getting ready to go do the Collegiate West Trail. It's a 160-mile loop. Part of it's on the Colorado Trail. And then we're going to go do the John Muir Trail. And Phil Manning, Executive Director of the Colorado Trail Foundation. Because the foundation makes this trail, and it's all volunteer. They maintain it, they change the route, and they just do a great job, and it's because of them that we can hike it. So support the foundation. I walked the Colorado Trail for the first time in the 1990s, and big chunks of it. But it had just kind of been completed, as a through trail. And I always wanted to put it all together and do the whole thing. And 2 seasons ago, I set off and I had 3 weeks of vacation, and I was like, I'm going to do the whole thing, and I was just going to kill it. And go out there, and I trained really hard, and I had, worked over my equipment, and I just thought, I'm going to go as far as I can and just see what happens. And I thought I'd just be like, I told a friend of mine, he was going to resupply me at Twin Lakes, and I said, no, I'll probably pop out on Kenosha Pass somewhere, And the trail kicked my butt. And so I came back the next year, and I really wanted to do the whole trail. And I saved up all my vacation time. I worked as a photo editor at the Denver Post. And so I didn't take a vacation day the whole year. So I had 4 weeks kind of stored up. And the further we got into it, the more I thought, I don't think I can do it in 4 weeks. I don't know what I'm going to do. And so I was really puzzled about it. And I told a friend of mine, I think I'm going to have to quit my job. And she was like, oh God, don't quit your job, And the very next day, they called us all down in the auditorium. And they said, this people's doing great, we won all these awards, paper looks fantastic, 22 of you gotta go. And I had a packet on the table. And I was the first one up to HR the next morning. And they're like, you've been thinking about this? I'm like, I have. So it was kind of a blessing. But I'm going to run through some pictures here. I don't always look like this up here. Sometimes I have sagebrush up there. A friend of mine was like, you don't really put sagebrush up your nose, do you? And I'm like, I do. The thing is, why is the big question. Why walk the Colorado Trail? And a year later, and getting ready to go on the trail again, I'm still thinking about that. Why? But it is one of the most beautiful trails in the country. It's spectacular. Why would you not want to walk the Colorado Trail? To day hike it, or section hike it, or through hike it, or do whatever you can. But the why of it, for me, was when I go out into the woods and on the trail, I want to lose everything. I want to strip everything down and kind of get back to the basics, real necessities. And so for me, that's kind of what walking on the trail is about, is returning to those basics. And people ask me, do you get lonely out there? Because I did it mostly solo. Every now and then friends have joined me for a segment or a few segments, but mostly alone. And I was happy to be out there alone. And they asked me if I had, did I have any bear experience? Did I wrestle any bears? And I was on the trail for 72 days. I'm the oldest, longest through hiker. And I saw one bear track. But I did have a bear experience. And I was at Hotel Draw, and I had put in a really long day. And I made a stew, and there was no water. I spilled it. And so I was like, okay, that's not good. So I cleaned it up as best as I could, and it got dark, and I crawled into the tent. And I was laying in the tent, and every now and then I'd have to check in with the editor at the Denver Post. Even though I'd left the Post, they were maintaining my blog. And so I called Jim, and I had like 2 bars of service. So I texted Jim, and I said, gosh, Jim, there was kind of a bear experience earlier today. A bear crossed the road in front of me, but I didn't see it. People in the Jeep saw it. And I said, I kind of have a dirty camp, but I'm not worried about it because I'm not in Wyoming or Montana. And then I said, there's a bear in my camp. And the phone went dead. And so by the time I got my bag unzipped and the tent unzipped and everything, the bear was gone. But I couldn't get back in contact with Jen until the next day. And in the meantime, she called search and rescue and everything. They're like, is this guy experienced and all that? Because that's a really big country out there. We're just not going to send people out searching like that. I said, yeah, he's pretty experienced. But that was my bear experience in the Colorado Trail. And so I got a chance by being out there so long to really live on the trail. And I got to see it in the summer, in the fall, and I thought I could see it in the winter. But I made it. High, spectacular country. This is Stony Pass. And people ask, what do you do out there all day? And aside from walking. And every day, something amazing and beautiful happens on the trail. Every day. And you just kind of live for that experience. Another thing is, I spoke to a group, and the theme was, we create the journey by walking. And we really do that. When we begin walking somewhere, we create that journey from the time that we conceive of it until we're on the trail, until we're through with it. And every day we create more of our journey. And it's a very personal thing. There's a saying called hike your own hike. And everybody needs to hike their own hike. Slow, fast, light, heavy, whatever. Not all the trail is high. Some of it goes through the timber like this. This is the Buffalo Creek burn area. Down in Long Gulch. This is Mineral Basin. This is Trevor and Tennille. And little did I know, a year later I'd be walking the trail with Trevor. But I met him at the end of the Colorado Trail last year. He through hiked it. And Trevor has hiked over 20,000 miles without sight. And I think that's pretty amazing. So at the end of my journey, I started from the south. I started in Durango and walked north. The general routes from north to south. But I started south and walked north. And so this was the first person I met, was Trevor. And then this guy, who just wanted to be called White Guy, who chain smoked the whole time I talked to him, and had ridden on a bike, he bought it in Walmart. And he said, every time I bike, they break down. He says, I just hitchhike into Walmart and get me a new one. No helmet, no bike, no bike gear, big pack on his back. And the next person was 6 years old. This is Buddy Backpack. He was closing in, finishing the Colorado Trail. So I had a blind hiker, a chain smoker, and a 6-year-old. And I thought, I gotta finish this thing. This is Proper Cheddar. And Proper Cheddar was doing a yo-yo at the Colorado Trail. And I bumped into him 3 times. As I was coming up out of Durango, I did Trail Ridge, going to Durango. And then I bumped into him again because he got to Durango and he decided he'd walk back to Denver. So this is what he was doing here. This is in the La Garita Wilderness. And he's called Proper Cheddar because he said he couldn't find proper cheddar over here. He's always looking for it. And one of the great things about the Colorado Trail is the people that you meet on the trail. It's a great, great community. This is Tadpole, and she's 69. She said her trail name was Tadpole because she hadn't quite decided what she was going to be when she grew up. This is Just Married. This is Flightless Feather and Hummingbird on San Luis Pass. Snap, Crackle, and Pop. Black Snake. I didn't get this guy's name. I heard him go by in the night. It was a tremendous storm. And so the next morning I got up and I was coming down the trail and he was just bivvied there and just slept under this tarp. He was just waking up, wet now. This is Mercury. Abraham. Andrew. This is Indian Trail Ridge. This is when you start from the south, this is the bridge that kind of goes from the La Plata Mountains into the San Juans. And it's high and it's beautiful and it's one of the most exposed places on the Colorado Trail. And I laid down below it for nearly a day waiting for a storm to clear. And I woke up about 3 in the morning, the stars were out, and I'm like, I'm out of here. There's a 30-mile section on the Continental Divide up above Elk Creek where you're totally out in the open. And this is part of that section. View from my tent. You can't beat that. This is in the Weminuche Wilderness. Everything is so green and there's water everywhere. This is Arrow and Vestal Peaks, Grenadier Range, as you're going through the Weminuche. This is Snow Mesa, off to the right, and it's very broad. I think it's about, I'm not sure how far across it actually is, but it's one of those places where you just don't want to get caught in a storm. And it's flat, there's no cover. And so I'd come up the night before, and I was going to go up in the afternoon. And a woman called Vixen was coming down the trail and she said, "You're not going up there, are you?" I'm like, "Well, I'm kind of thinking about it." And she goes, "No, I think you just ought to take a nap." Because clouds were building up and it was starting to thunder a little bit. So I laid down and I kind of took a nap and I woke up and I thought, okay, I'm going to go up there. So I started going up there and it started raining. And so I put down in a little kind of bivouac camp. I got up early the next morning, the sky was totally blue, it was beautiful. And I just went for it. And I was looking back, I'm looking back now across the mesa up here. And then you come to the tail end of it. And I thought, this is great, I'm gonna try all my stuff out. So I laid everything out. I sat there, I had a great lunch, I had a good time. And now when I look at photographs, I can see these clouds, these huge shadows move in, you know. And in about 5 minutes, I was sprinting, you know, and it was just, the storm chased me all the way up to the end of the mesa, and then you still got to climb. I was pretty nervous, like Darth Vader going over. I got up on top and I thought, you know, there's trees down there. And when I hit those trees, I'm going to be okay. And it was thundering so hard. It was the kind of thunder that would just knock you to the ground. I mean, it felt like being thrown under a train, you know. And I got down and I hit the trees just as like the storm started, you know, it started hailing and raining and pounding. And so the first trees I saw, you know, I jumped right into the side of it. And I was standing there and I whipped out my umbrella and I was standing with my umbrella, you know, and hail's pounding on it and everything. And I got a weird feeling. And so I looked like over my right shoulder and there's a cow moose standing there. And she wasn't from here to the curtains. And she had this little tiny calf, just kind of sheltering under a brisket, you know. And she was standing there and you could just see her nostrils just going. And so I'm just like, okay. Jumped back out in the rain and shot on down the trail. That's the little booty camp I was telling you about. I couldn't put up a tent, the ground wasn't level, so I just kind of curled up under the trees and covered myself with my tent fly. This was a great camp. This was up in the big country up on the Continental Divide. Rainy day on the trail. And I have tons of pictures of things drying out. And sometimes the way is a little unclear. So this is where the Colorado Trail and the Continental Divide cross paths. And it doesn't look like any of the country, you know, you expect the Continental Divide, you always expect it to be really high and wild and everything. But a lot of it is high sagebrush country, ranch country. This is a shelter. And a trail angel who's trailing, I think it's Apple. Is that Apple's trailer? Put this horse trailer out in the middle of this huge flat area because it's fearsome out there in a storm. And you walk up to this trailer and there's a tub there, which usually is full of root beer and pop, which was not when I got there. But inside the trailer, he's put a stove, wood, and the hikers have left all these notes of gratitude. So we call that trail magic. This is not trail magic, that's self-doctoring after a dog bite. This is trail magic. At the Highway 114, there's a bucket and it was full of Snickers.
Was there any left when you left?
Oh, there was, yeah. I had my pockets stuffed full. It was great. This is resupply. This is, you go into a town, you're out of food, everything's done, and for a while I shipped boxes to myself, but my food taste changed so dramatically on the trail that when I would get a resupply box, I'd be so disappointed. Because you'd open it up, you know, and you're at home, and like 5 months ago, you know, instant potatoes sound good. And suddenly, you know, like a month later, instant potatoes is like just not sound good at all. So I ended up going into towns, hitching into towns, and going to the grocery store. And so this is what it all looks like dumped out of the bag. The before it goes in the back. This is on Hope Pass. And I became really good at grazing my way up the trail. And I learned about wild raspberries and wild strawberries. It's a rainy day on the trail. I wanted to say something in the photograph about the weather. I didn't want to stop moving and I didn't want to look up. Texas Creek. Another trail junction with a Continental Divide. A friend came out and joined me, and we got to Hancock Lake, and a fisherman gave us a beer. And it was an awesome moment. It's a rainy morning inside the tarp. And this is a storm rolling in. This is I was on Chalk Creek Pass, looking back, and a big storm was just rolling, just creeping down over the mountain, and just rolling up towards me. So you shoot these pictures and then you move. You know? Not a lot of storm pictures. And I had never hitchhiked my whole life, but last summer I hitchhiked all the time. And it was one of the most amazing experiences that I've had. One day I hitchhiked from Monarch Pass to Cottonwood Pass in 3 rides, and it was just boom, boom, boom. And the first person that picked me up took me into town. It was pouring down rain. And he took me into town, he took me right to the post office so I could pick up my resupply box. Then he took me to the coffee shop, he bought me a big coffee. Then he took me out to the highway where I could get a better ride. So I waited there, I was standing there like 2 minutes, you know, my box is getting soaked and everything. And a traveling hospice nurse picked me up. And she took me all the way to Buena Vista. And so we had a great visit. And I asked her, I said, well, what have you learned? What have you learned from your patients? And she said, the dying think to living are wasting time. And I really liked that. You know, I standing by the road late at night. And it's a successful ride. Calamity Jane, but I want to talk a little bit about, you know, a lot of people ask me like, well, I can't just quit my job. I'm going to wait till retirement. Or I'm going to wait till this happens. Or I'm going to wait till I save enough money. Or I'm going to do this. And I always tell them, you know, it's like, all you got is right now. I mean, you don't know what's going to happen. And while I was on the trail, a friend of mine named Steve Campbell got cancer. Steve was pretty sick, and he would text me or we would talk whenever I hit a town. And I just can't tell you how sick he was. And, so one day I asked him, I said, Steve, what can I do for you? And he said, what you can do is just be the master of your own life. And so I really took that to heart. That's what we all have to do. This is Calamity Jane. And Calamity Jane turned me on to berries. And these are huckleberries, and there were so many of them in the Cochetopa Hills that you could literally walk around and scoop your hand up through them and come up with not that quite big a handful, but a lot of them. So I walked along eating huckleberries until my face was just purple, smashing them up there. It's an innovative trail marker. This is my single bear print. This is outside of Tank 7 Creek. there was one track, the others were all tracked up by elk. And, it was a big track. This is bears' territorial markings. They'll go and they find an aspen tree and they reach as high as they can. And they reach their claws up there like, I'm the biggest bear in the woods. If you can beat this, that's a fresh one. This is an old bird. This is getting close to Marshall Pass. And just joyful morning, just alone, feeling pretty good about it. And actually, the night before, I'd come rambling down onto Marshall Pass, and I was walking through this campsite, and these guys called me over, and they said, "Hey, you want a beer?" And they had a tub of M&Ms. They were like, it was great. My first haircut was in Salida. This is Mahala Gaylord. She was with the Denver Post and came out and did some video work with me. And she had never been backpacking before, or camping. And we woke up pretty rainy morning, and Mahala got up and was just enjoying the first light of warmth on her face. Walking at night. We camped below the Chalk Creek down below the cliffs. It was a beautiful morning. And I introduced her to the joys of hitchhiking. And during the fall, it was so beautiful. I just spent days and days walking through country like this. Just a carpet of aspens and gold everywhere you looked. This is the trail marker up on Mount Yale, pointing away. And so deadfall, and I don't quite remember where this is. A lot of blowdown. It's near Twin Lakes. My friend Tom at a fire down on the Timberline Trail. I only built 2 fires in my whole trip. Not much of a fire person. Sampled all the little springs. I generally kind of treated my water, but if it was flowing right out of the rocks or right out of moss, I just filled up and drank. Sweet water. This is in the Holy Cross Wilderness. Shaking the frost off in the Holy Cross Wilderness. This is another bit of hiker magic. This is outside of Tennessee Pass. And this whole cooler was filled with pop. And a huge, thick notebook of thankfulness. There it is. Pretty sweet. This is Camp Hale. These are the old bunkers. And 2 friends joined me to hike the segment through Camp Hale. This is my friend Max Young on a really cold morning. And there we are going up over Kokomo Pass. And we're headed through Cyril Pass. And we had an amazing day. It was stormed kind of all day long. It was one of those kind of light show days where the storms come and go, and there's rainbows, and there's rain, and there's snow, and there's hail, and 5 minutes later it's all something else. We're approaching Cyril Pass. The light's getting better and better. And it got really good. And so I decided that I needed to run to the top of Cyril Pass so I could shoot back, because we had this beautiful vista, all this alpenglow going on, all this wonderful stuff happening. And I like to run trails. And so I took off, and my pack was really light, going to resupply in Frisco, like the next day, and everything was gone, it was empty. And so I took off running, and I caught a foot, and I went down so hard I didn't even bounce. And I laid there, and I thought, I was kind of taking inventory. I was like, okay, and bump your head with a rock, didn't break your nose, didn't knock out any teeth, didn't go all the way down. Legs are okay, I can move them. I couldn't move my left arm. And I'd ripped holes in my new wrap jacket, which really got me. But, and I had shards of rock in my hands. And Max took these pictures. I was pretty stunned. But the upshot was, we got down the mountain. Max and Tom kind of escorted me down the mountain. We couldn't get down. That happened in the evening. So we had to camp just down below the top of the pass. And we had no pain medicine. Tom had like a little 1/4 inch of whiskey, which worked okay. But I was in such extreme pain. We couldn't really, Max looked at it, he's kind of a paramedic, and he said, I don't know, he goes, could be a rotator cuff, could be a strain or something. So the next day we got down to Frisco. It took us most of the day, walked me slowly down to Frisco. We went to Copper first, caught the bus, then I caught then we went on over to the ER in Frisco. First we had to stop for a beer. We had 2 beers. And then I went to the ER, and they took an x-ray, and they told me, the doctor said, you're done. And, we don't know how bad it is, but we think it's a rotator cuff. And if it's a rotator cuff, you're not going back on the trail. And I said, well, I kind of got to finish. It was 120 miles to my house in Conifer. And so they gave me some Percocets. And he said, why don't you hang around town a couple days, and if it really, really gets worse, you're going to have to go get a real MRI, and you're going to have to get this checked out. And if it gets better, well, okay. So I hung around for 2 days, and then I'm just like, I got to go. And one of the photographers over at the Post, Lindsay Pierce-Martin, drove to Frisco. And she said, okay, well, I'll walk over the top of the 10-mile road with you. And so we did. Despite the rain and hail. And Lindsay was modeling my rain kilt. And we made the top of the ridge and got over the top of the 10 miles. And that's kind of how I finished the trip in my sling. This is at Breckenridge. This is my son and his girlfriend. This is Sean and Emily. And they kind of met me in Breckenridge and then walked me up Gold Hill for a ways. some pine beetle management. And at Gold Hill, I had kind of one of the stranger experiences I had on the trail. And I was walking up there, it was night, and I was not moving very well. You know, I couldn't really, getting my pack on and off was a major deal. You know, and I would have to find like a boulder or a rock, and I'd have to kind of scrunch down, get the weight off my shoulders, and work one arm through, and then kind of throw the pack over to the other side. You know, and it almost involved like getting down on the ground. And so I was walking, and it was getting dark, and I couldn't find a spot flat enough to pitch my tent or anything, even to lay flat. So I thought, you know, you always think, okay, up on top there's going to be something. And it was growing dark. And I got up there, and of course the first spot you find is like, oh, that's nice and flat, but there's probably something better on down. So I started walking on down, and I got the weirdest feeling that I was being followed. And I just got to thinking about it, you know. And I was walking, and it was like the hair on my neck, and my head was all bristling up. And then I just couldn't go any further. My feet would not go any further. It was like, that's it, you're stopping right here. And so I just kind of thought, okay, it's kind of twilight, you know, I'm kind of limping along, I'm not looking really good, you know. I look like something that should be cold. But I never found anything. I never saw anything, never heard anything, nothing. And I stopped at that spot, wasn't going around the bend. I just kind of backed up and turned around and went back and pitched my tarp and made a heck of a lot of noise and crawled inside. I didn't even pick supper. And that was one of the strangest experiences I've had on the trail. And I never saw anything. So it's like a lot of our fears, I don't think we see. A lot of things we manifest. So I don't know whether it's my imagination or something real, but I'm going with it. Old faded sign of the trail marker. And as I got closer to Georgia Pass, the weather started getting worse. I woke up one morning to this kind of storm going on up where I was headed. And I got up on top, and everything was good. And I sat down, you know, it was beautiful, and I thought, okay, I'll have breakfast. So I sat down and had my oatmeal. By the time I finished my oatmeal, it was snowing so hard. There were little drifts piled up behind the trees. And I walked down, and I just got out of there, and I got out of there just in time. I was looking back at Georgia and that mountain range where the storm was rolling in. This is from Kenosha Pass. And by this time, I was really hurt. And at night, you know, sleep was really painful because the ground's hard, it's cold. And I didn't like taking the Percocets, but at night, I would have to take a couple. And a friend of mine was coming to resupply me at Kenosha Pass, and I had to make a decision like the next morning, and I was like, okay, I've got to get off the trail, because this is not getting better. But if I got off the trail, would I come back? And that was the big question in my mind. You know, you get home, you get comfortable, you get warm, you know, it's hard to come back. So I went home, and I stayed there 2 days, and then I had to get back on the trail. And so this is in Bailey, Colorado, one of the more unusual trail signs. And this is on the east side of Kenosha Pass, which is where I took up the trail again. This is mountain lion scat. And there's a lot of them in the Lost Creek Wilderness. A lot. I finally stopped taking pictures of every pile I saw. I was very impressed. So more of the golden walking towards the end. Not everybody appreciates the trail signs. And another friend of mine had texted me and he said, "Are you crossing Highway 120 today?" I'm like, "Well, I think so." So he said, "Okay." So later that evening, I got another text and it said, "Look," he said, "you see the pine tree with the pink ribbon around it?" He goes, "Go 50 feet east of that and look under a fallen log." Well, this whole area's been logged over. There's like 1 million trees with pink ribbons around it. It took me an hour and a half to find this beer. And I drank one of these beers and I had to camp there. I was done. This is the Buffalo Creek Burn. And a lot of people don't like walking through the burn. A lot of people say, you walk from Denver to Durango and you're going from the least beautiful part to the most beautiful part, the San Juan Mountains. And for me, I really liked going south to north. And I loved hitting the Buffalo Creek Burn. And the thing I loved most about it, aside from the beautiful morning mists, was the regeneration within the burn. And it's not devastated. I mean, it's coming back, it's beautiful. And in a way, I kind of thought that was what I'd kind of done with my life, is I had my own personal forest fire. I left my job, left everything, walked the Colorado Trail. And so I was kind of going through my own personal regeneration. And it's still happening. But I was talking with Trevor today, and it's like following your heart. It only leads to good things. And nothing but goodness has happened to me since I started on the trail, on the path to the trail. And it just kind of continues to unfold. I was camped below the Buffalo Creek Burn, and I thought I was the last person coming north. And this young couple came up the trail, and they were like, "Are you Ghost?" Which is my trail name. I'm like, "Yeah," and they go, "Man, we've been following you since Durango." I finally caught you. So they were the last through riders. My last camp. And this is the North Fork of the South Platte River as it comes under the Judy Gaskell Bridge. It's the end of segment 2. Segment 1 was closed because of bear trouble. And so a lot of hikers couldn't do segment 1. But my goal was to walk home anyway. And that was one reason I started down south. My home is in Conifer, Colorado. And so I wanted to walk up to my doorstep. And so you can get off the Colorado Trail and you walk up the road a little bit and hit a trail called the North Fork Trail, which goes 9 miles up to Reynolds Park. And then you can weave and wind your way up to the highway. And then I'm not very far off the highway. So on October 17th, I walked into my own door. Oh. That's what happened after getting the woods for 2 days. Anyway, that's my story. If you have any questions, be happy. Yes, sir.
So what was it with your shoulder, and how many pounds did you pack on average?
My pack on average was, at the very last, I weighed the last pack I had, and it was 24 pounds. But pack, it depends. After you resupply, it can be upwards towards 30. But I think mostly I carried a 30 and under pound pack. And what happened to my shoulder was, I tore the rotator cuff, the worst tear, my surgeon told me, he said it was the worst tear he ever seen. And I also stripped the tendon off the bicep. And so when they went in for surgery, he said, we can't do anything about the biceps, so we're just going to snip it loose. You know, and it'll find a home. So it did, and that, I mean, it's fine. I had surgery, I got off the trail October 17th, and I had surgery November 25th, Thanksgiving Day. And spent the winter. But I never felt I left the trail, because every time I moved my arm, it hurt. Anybody else? Yes?
What did taste good?
What tasted good?
You said your taste changed.
Cheese. I really developed a fondness for cheese. And I really like Mountain House lasagna. That's really good. And I also developed a fondness for salmon, like the package of salmon. You know, and I had spent the whole, God, almost, months and months dehydrating my own food. I wanted to be really healthy, dehydrated my meals. I had 2 dehydrators going almost 24 hours a day. And when I got on the trail, I didn't want any of that stuff. You know, you eat so much of it when you're making it. And I also made my own energy bars. I thought that'd be really smart. I couldn't stand them. I was like, I could not eat these things. And the other thing I did is I decided, I got into this whole thing about, very lightweight, calorie dense, nutritionally good. And so I made pemmican, which is the kind of the old Native American food. And it's all fat and lean meat. And back in the day it was buffalo. But so I got lean, grass-fed, grass-finished beef, tallow from the same grass finished, and I mixed it 50-50. And supposedly the fat gives you a lot of energy and everything. And this was going to be my main go-to food on the trail. I hated it. I mean, I ate a lot of it while I was making it, and you get kind of like, oh, that's pretty good, kind of addicted. But once I got on the trail, I didn't want it. But it's been good for trading. Yes, sir.
So what was your total travel time?
I'm sorry, what?
What was your total travel time?
72 days. Yep. A long time. A lot of people do it 3 weeks. 6 weeks is pretty normal. I'm slow. Yes?
What was your longest and shortest trip each day?
My longest and shortest trip was the day I didn't go anywhere. I did my longest day I think was around 20. And my shortest day was probably about 3 because I got put down by storms. And I was up in the San Juans and I just, you know what? I'm just going to sit here for a day. So I think I averaged about 12 to 14 miles a day. But I fool around a lot. I shoot a lot of pictures and study clouds, take naps. Anyone else? Yes?
What kind of camera did you use?
I used a point and shoot. I used an Olympus TG4. It's weatherproof, it's freeze-proof, waterproof, everything. And it's Dean-proof, which is really important. This time on the trip, I'm taking the Olympus OMD, which is very lightweight. It's a mirrorless camera. And it's totally weatherproof. We'll see if it's Dean-proof. And so I'm going to carry some more equipment this year. Yes?
2 questions. What are you doing this year?
This year, I'm going to walk the Collegiate West Loop with Trevor. And then we're going over and do the John Muir Trail.
Oh.
Collegiate is a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful loop. And we're going to kind of use it to kind of get our trail legs and acclimated for the Sierras.
And are you familiar with this, that the Trail Foundation is handing out?
Yes.
The dotted black line, is that where it crosses the Continental Trail?
I'm going to
Continental
let
Divide
Diane
Trail?
answer that.
Is that the Continental Divide Trail?
The dotted black line on your map is the Continental Divide itself,
Right.
not the Continental Divide Trail.
Oh.
And the Continental Divide Trail loosely follows the Continental Divide.
What did you say your new camera was?
It's an Olympus OMD E1.
What is your goal for this new trip that you want to do? Why do you want to do it again?
Why do I want to do it again?
Yeah.
Well, I've actually done the collegiate West twice. This will be my third time. And I want to do it with Trevor and Tania. And plus I want to see it again.
Uh-huh.
So it's such an amazing country to be in.
Yeah.
It's a good opportunity to do it. That's a pretty vague answer.
That's great. That's great. No, totally.
Uh-huh.
You don't use a tent?
I do use a tent, and I also use a tarp. And last,
There wasn't a tent in any of the pictures I was
no, it just varies. The bugs, I used 3 different kinds of shelter, and I used a tarp for most of it, and then I switched off and did a tent, and then I had a tarp tent, which somebody loaned me. And I prefer the tarp. I like the tarps a lot.
And was there rain on most days?
There wasn't rain every day, but there were periods of rain. It's kind of generally like late afternoon, the storms would kind of roll in. But last year seemed a little unusual. I mean, on San Luis Pass, I woke up and I had thunder at 6:30 in the morning. And, everything was just kind of thrown off a little bit. But generally rain, but the great thing in Colorado is, it rains and then you've got sunshine and dry all your stuff out and move on. But the storms are the biggest thing about the trail. People ask, about bears and mountain lions and all this stuff. Lightning. Lightning is the most fearsome thing on the trail. Yes?
Did you come across very many people who were doing the trail with livestock, either riding or pack animals? Or...
A few. There was, I met one guy and his wife that were doing the trail on horses, had pack horses. But I didn't see many horse people out, on sections or anything. I mean, in the fall when it got into October, I bumped into a lot of hunters, pack animals and things. But not a lot of horse traffic.
There's a lot of people that own llamas worked on that trail, on the village.
Yeah, yes.
So I was just wondering if you saw people.
I did not see any llamas last year. The year before, I did see people with llamas. Uh-huh.
Did you write it all?
Did I write? Yes. I had a blog. It was called The Long Haul. And it's still up. Like I said, despite quitting the Denver Post, they created this wonderful platform for me to write and to post pictures to. And so whenever I had cell connection, I did that. And when I get to town,
What was your most moving experience?
my most moving experience? I think my most moving experience was the shot I had of my shadow when I was kind of alone and in that big country. I was so happy. And I think that the whole trail was a very moving experience for me. Hard to really highlight one thing, but I remember that morning because I was ecstatic. I was happy and I was moving well and everything was great. And it was joy. It was a very joyful day.
How could we find your blog?
If you just go on and Google and search Long Haul,
Okay.
it's still up. Still.
Okay.
It's a great read.
How many, like, packing your food, how many days could you carry? And then I heard you say you go to a post office sometimes, and sometimes people would drop it off, but how did you work that with the food?
It varied all the time because of distance and elevation and where you were going. But generally, I would end up carrying about 5 days worth of food between, resupplies. Some parts a bit longer because some parts it's a bit harder to get off the trail. Like on the Collegiate West, there's not a lot of towns. On the east side of the Collegiate West, you got Salida and Buena Vista, all these places. So it just kind of depended on mileage and ease of resupply. Anything else? All right. Well, thank you very much. Bill Manning, I'd like to say a few words.
We'll have a raffle